Welcome back to my basement. This is the thrilling release of Wave Warp. Wave Warp is a video synthesis engine for TouchDesigner. It's kind of like audio synthesis, but we're using just these static waveforms to generate RGB. Make waveforms, combine them, and then warp them. And that's it. This component here, you drop it in, look at this little instructions. Control-Shift-U will pop open this UI. The network's not that complicated. Here you can see that 3 waveforms for RGB or XYZ if you want to kind of use this as information for making abstract 3D. Different wave types. You can use waves, or we could do this all with noise and have the same controls. Combinations of the two or whatever. But in principle, yeah, we got waves or noise, different types of math, and then we get creative with that. And that's it. It's honestly, I'll do a tutorial for the concept. You can make your own version of this, but I think you're going to like what I made as well. I'll just say much more complicated than the network itself. This UI is most of the network. I put a lot of work into making the user experience better than I ever have. And hopefully it shows. Anyways, here we go. Part 1 is making waves. Let's make some waves. So this first knob is your different types, which it will say. I'm not going to go too in depth with the wave types. You'll see what they do. Period is just how often they repeat or don't. Amplitude and direction, which is not like a typical synth thing, but I kind of like this drifting oscillation. We're not doing high frequency stuff. We're just kind of using this for patterns. And then on this next section, you'll see that each one of these gives you a combination of 2 of the wave types that you make up top, and then your math type. And so this first one is for basically your red channel, and the second one will be let's get some noise in here. So you have add, subtract, average, minimum, maximum. And here you can see what these different combinations are actually outputting. And in the bottom section, it's the same on both tabs, but you have saturation, contrast. There's other level controls in the menu, but and then this lookup. And the lookup is basically you just pick a spot on here as your light color and another as your dark, and it kind of gives it more of a unified color view. Just a quick way to like not have it be so RGB. That's a C Phantasm kind of sparked that idea for me on TikTok a while back. Then on the warp tab, basically have feedback, a cache, stretch, skew, and 2 displacements. So starting with the feedback, you should be able to see what's going on very easily. Translate X, Y, rotate, scale. There's some more menu parameters associated with this, but you can kind of dictate how much empty space is in the pixels. It's like the more empty space, the more room the feedback can propagate. And so if I crank this way up, you'll see that you get more of that like repeating patterns, because really it's a thin strip of pixel information, RGB. Each one of the waveforms is like 0 is going to be black, 1 is white. So anywhere where red, green, and blue come together at 1, it'll be white. But just along a thin strip, and this feedback is mostly going to be empty space. So you can get creative with that. But yeah, this feedback empty space pixels is like how much empty rooms are we playing with that feedback amount. And you can pick whether you want it in the center or at the top or bottom. Also has a weirdly strange effect. This cache one's a little counterintuitive. It's actually you see the cache composite mode on or off. Cache max size. That's how many frames we're storing in memory. of our waveforms. So we turn this on, and you can control what. So you have your current frame, and then your selected recent past in the cache. Literally just blending those two to make like almost another math process to this output. So really kind of mangling it in several places. And this has all your different blend modes that you've ever seen in Photoshop or TouchDesigner. And you can see you can get a lot of different variants just between this. The one thing I'll say is when you make changes over here with the cache mode on, you'll see kind of a delay of an update. Like I'll switch this and you'll see it happen again, like 44 frames earlier or later, it kind of repeats itself. But when you have settings that repeat, you're not playing with the waveform so much, you won't see that delay. Yeah, and then from there, we can stretch this out. And then displacing it, here is you choose which color you want each axis to be displaced. So up and down is the Y axis. We can switch that to red and X. So this just like, I mean, you can get extreme with both of these and get some very, very interesting patterns. And if we go back to the waveforms, you'll still see how the waveforms have the most impact on what is happening here. But this direction might be a little sensitive. Like you don't need really big values for a lot of change to be happening. Both of these displacements actually have bypass. You see them get dark, so they're not being rendered in the output. I'm going to turn this cache back off, so it's a little bit more obvious how we're controlling things. But yeah, and then the lookup, again, pretty easy. There's no, like this is not a mathematically perfect. I just needed all the different color values, some dark and some light to let you pick from this. And it kind of remaps some of the color values. And again, this lookup button toggles it. So that's your UI. Let me look at the menu here. For the sake of this running well, this UI optimization basically just does a half resolution on all, since there's so much graphical stuff getting rendered just for the interface. It really just crunches down the resolution of everything that you're seeing on the UI, and that will give you a little frame boost. The other thing is this pixel format. It's going to default to 32-bit float, which basically means, like, as I told you earlier about how, 0 being black, 1 being white, is just how pixels are displayed on screens. But that doesn't mean you can't have, it's like if this amplitude, if the middle is 1 and this is 2, well, maybe it's going to blow out your pixels to be white, but you can carry information above and below 1 and 0. Especially for like 3D rendering. And it also has to do with just kind of like the fidelity. How much information is there, especially if you're like interpolating pixel data. It's kind of the quality, but it makes every single operation happening, I don't know, 4 times more expensive to run. So if you, switch this to 8-bit fixed, everything's going to be clamped at 0 at 1 as far as the pixel information goes, and it will run a lot smoother. But you might see the quality of your final output get a little mashed. 16-bit float, that's kind of your middle ground. And then waveform samples resolution. I don't know if I have this really fine-tuned yet, but basically 10 is going to be your default, but you can get more samples, which is going to, as I do the chop to top conversion, that is going to result in basically higher fidelity of the underlying waveform to RGB conversion. God, I sound like a nerd. As we go through this menu, you may realize that almost everything is a 0 to 1 value. And I did that just so that all of these controls are easily MIDI mappable. This first, the wave generation representing this, wave shape, this goes from 0 to 1, even though it encompasses all the different shapes. All of these are going to have normalized values on the menu. And where I thought it was important when we get into the warp section, and another thing you might realize is when you change values on the menu, it's going to bring up the UIs tab. So go back to the wave generation. So you can control it from either place. And anywhere where you don't see, so it's like max feedback transform, what that means is like this will move 136 or 130 pixels. And if I change this to 10, then that range of that knob will just go basically plus minus 10. And a lot of these is like 0.5 will be in the middle. You can kind of control the fidelity of how these knobs move. So feedback, transform, rotate, scale, same thing. Scale is going to be like, it's at 0.48. So if I scrunch this down, you can see that like, so 1 minus 4.8, that's like half stretched. If I change this to 9, 0.9, that means when I crank this all the way down, it's going from 1 being normal to 0.1, which is like a 90% compression. And when I bring this up to the large end, now we're looking at the X is scaled to 1.85. I guess it can go a little higher. 1.9. It's not super intuitive, but I did include the information. Like this is normally what you'd be controlling, like feedback transform. You'd be like going in there and like putting in the number of pixels. So I just made the controls simple, 0 to 1, and you fine tune it with these other controls for like the min, max, or maximum. Same thing with the post feedback, this stretch and skew. It's like how much do you want this rotation to go? 180 in both directions? Maybe that's too aggressive. Maybe you want it to be 360, whatever. I don't know. Instead of having to go in and edit the network, you can just choose how much these sliders affect everything. And I might keep doing this going forward with future components. I think it's kind of handy. Don't have to edit any math chops. They're just in the menu. Although it makes the menu a little more dense. And then we have the second warp tab, which is just about the displacements. And I initially had it where you could select them from here, but I think having these, the only controls are on the UI in this case. And then same thing, min, max, displace mod. So if you want this displacement to really, really stretch, you can do that. But with the displacement, these smaller values actually give you something. You can have a gentler approach to this, especially with two of them being in the workflow. But both, you could have one that's gentle and another one that's aggressive, if that makes sense. I don't know. This is just to play with. But anyways, that's it. And then your output levels, saturation and contrast are in the menu, but you can go in here and, if you want to really crank the black level or something, you can get in there and do that. Oh, sorry. I just realized I'm covering up part of the menu with this, but I don't know. Download the component. You'll see what I'm talking about. That's the bare bones of this. Now I will just do a couple examples of what you can do with this output. So I've been using this Connect V2. That's been my main camera this video. I also have just the webcam in this laptop. And now we're going to use that to show some time displacements. Yeah, let's look at that. Here we're just using this kind of generative wave data to manipulate time. It's a very simple technique. Basically, it's your input Texture 3D time machine. So basically the darker regions pass normal time and the brighter ones control further back in time. So using this plugin to sort of draw when things shift. That's a lot of delay. You can see that you don't have to use this just for making abstract patterns. You can use it as information to control other things. This is one example of that. Another one would be just as a displacement itself. So in this example, just like we're using, red and green to push where these pixels are kind of stretched and squeezed, we can use this information to do the same thing. Here I have a quick and dirty motion feedback effect. Where there's motion, it holds for a little bit. And it leaves all this empty space for iterations of whatever. Then we can basically take this motion feedback, use our wave warp output to smear another feedback layer. So again, we're not displaying what this is making. We're using it as a means to manipulate video further. So you can see the relationship between our waveforms and this, but it's not one-to-one. We're using the green and the red to tell how strong and what direction this should be. So I do have like these controls. I can make it more extreme so that you see, and it's like the displace, for whatever reason, it like defaults the weights to 1 when it should default them to 0.01 is a lot. When I was making this, I was like, yes, you can make some really cool patterns. I've been interested in video synthesis, never been able to afford modular or anything, but it's also kind of a utility when you think about it, as far as like, well, I want to have some physical controls for manipulating video, not just making kind of cool abstract patterns, which I like, but there's more. There's more. I'm going to use this for more, and I'll think of some more examples. I'll show you some more, but just so you know, like what you see is what you get, but that doesn't have to be it. So in this case, I'm using this color information here for the material texture color, but what I'm doing is converting this channel information into position and rotation data. I've never used pops before. I don't really know what I'm doing, but yeah, that's a thing. You can see how these different, I'll bring the amplitude down of everything, and now you can see that we're using this to control 3D. But yeah, it's another way of visualizing the relationship between all these things. There's like 600 points along each of these channels. That's kind of like the fidelity of the waveform, but that can also be a point in 3D space. And that'd be another reason to go in and play with the waveform resolution. You can make it smaller, and you can make it larger. I don't know. Watch my computer crash. Which will change the color information, but it's also, if you want to just convert this channel information into something that can be used to instance 3D, then there you go. Anyways, that's just an experiment, and just another way of just showing you, and I'll include these examples if they're worth anything. And yeah, so this is probably getting pretty long. I'll do one more section with setting up MIDI controls, and then I'll turn you loose. When you plug in a MIDI controller and you map something to a slider, it will bring up the UI tab for whatever you're controlling. I spent a lot of time on little things like that, where it's like, will anyone notice? I don't know, but I thought it was cool. Everything that's on the UI is going to be a 0 to 1 value. MIDI comes 0 to 127, You just use a math chop, convert it all from 0 to 127 to 0 to 1, and you should just be able to immediately start referencing all these different parameters. So if you happen to have this Korg NanoKontrol, you'll maybe want this component I have to be able to really just one-for-one match my little portable workflow. I'm not going to get you set up with MIDI. There's a lot of tutorials about setting up a MIDI device. So start there. But when you know you've got all of your buttons and stuff, oh, maybe I should have the camera on the controller. So if you have enough sliders, you can just get your MIDI device in. You'll see these values like go, up to 127. You can just take a math chop and convert that 0 to 1. But I didn't have enough sliders for everything I wanted to control. So I made this little tool to help me remap some of that. So bank A, bank B, that is just for internal use. So I can just take these. This is control 159 and 160 for me. And that should let me basically choose between banks. So here I've got knob 1, and when I change to the other bank, it updates over here now. See? One knob, and or I can do just this slider. You see slider 1, and I switch to bank 2. Now it's slider 1 on bank B, bank A, bank B. That is how I reuse multiple sliders and knobs, and it holds the previous value. All right, let's get into the fun stuff. You can map this however you like. So I'm going to go on my bank A, and we'll go knob 1, knob 2, knob 1 to shape 1, knob 2 to period, and then I'll do slider 1 to amp, and slider 2 to direction. And just keep making references for all these controls. I'll do knob 3 for shape 2, knob 4 for period, and then slider 3 for the amplitude, slider 4 for the speed direction. And now you can see all these physical controls are working. And you can keep going. And then I'll go over to bank 2 and map some of the warp. And same thing. So all of these controls. Let's see, I'm just going to go down the line. Knob 1 to translate X. Knob 2, translate Y. We'll just do all the feedback controls in a row. So you'll see in in 5 minutes you can map really fast for this, and then the rest of the controls are for how much of a fine tune do you want this range to be. I'm going to finish mapping this for myself, but just so you see, I put a lot of work into just making this as adaptable and easy from the start. So I'll wrap this up. So yeah, I'm excited to get this in the wild. I'll get the tool out there right away, have a demo network with some of these examples so you can see some of these alternative workflows, and I hope you get some good use out of this, and I thank you for past support and future support. Peace. Live long and prosper, y'all. How do you do a Spock? There we go. Peace.